Hi guys, this is part 3 in a 3-part track walkthrough series. Going to be taking you through some of the production techniques used in the making of the track Recall by Reframe. The track was written in the Future Engineers production sessions and is due out for release on Transference very soon. In this video I'm going to be taking you through how I constructed the bass and how I built the individual elements and layers. Let's take a look. In this video, I'm going to focus on how I processed the individual layers that make up the second bass line in the track. Here we can see the MIDI parts for the bass line. And I'm playing the bass from a sampler in Logic, and I have some portamento on just to give that slight pitch bend between each note. Now, I'll generally split my bass into separate frequency layers. This way I have more control over the individual elements and I can treat them separately depending on what I want them to do or how I like them to sit in the mix. Here on the left I have my sampler channel, and you'll see that I have split the signal into 3 duplicate channels using 3 bus returns here. This is a common approach I use to split a sound into separate frequency bands. I'm essentially creating 3 copies of the same sound by sending the signal 3 times, each to a new bus. I've set the buses to pre-fade and I've set the channel output to no output, as the signal is now being routed through the 3 bus channels instead. And when I click on each bus, you'll see that the channel on the right hand side changes to reflect the bus channel that I've just selected. To keep things tidy, I work my way up the frequency spectrum with each bus. So for example, this first bus is for my sub layer, the second bus is for my low mids, and so forth, depending on how many layers I want in the track. And each bus will have different processing depending on how it needs to sit in the frequency spectrum and what other instruments are interacting with it. So for my first bus, I have my sub layer. I'm using Slate Digital Classic Console Collection just to give the bass some warmth, and I've also got some Saturn 2 just to give it a little bit of colour. I have an EQ with a high cut, as I only want this channel to represent the low frequencies in the bass, so only really anything under about 120 Hz. For the sub layer channel, I will also use some sidechain compression with the kick drum, as commonly these instruments will both occupy a similar space in the frequency spectrum. I've also applied some multi-band compression sidechain to the kick as well, but as the mix tightens up, having both of these is not always necessary. So now we're back at the sampler channel. I'm going to turn off the first bus and I'm going to move on to the second bus. You'll hear that the second bus layer has a low cut on it, below 120 Hz, so we just want this layer to take over from where the sub layer left off. With the mid layer, we experimented with some distortion, saturation, some clipping and some filtering to excite the upper harmonics and give the layer some movement. The upper mids already had quite a lot of stereo information, so we didn't feel that it needed to be treated on this occasion, but Often I'll process the sides differently to give more width and separation from the sublayer. Now let's hear both layers in context with each other. Finally, for the third layer, I copied the channel strip from the second layer, put more of a low EQ cut on so it became more of an upper to high mids layer, and just continued to experiment with different combinations of distortion and filtering to give it more presence in the higher frequencies. Now let's have a quick listen to all three layers in context. With the two mid layers, I've sent them both to a new bus so I can control and process them together. I've used a little bit of reverb just to give them some separation. And I've also used some further side chaining to make sure that the mid frequencies are not clashing with the fundamental frequency of the snare. Now that we have the three bass layers working well together, we needed to consider how the double bass layer would sit. Here is both parts in context with each other. For this last step, I'm using track spacer on the summed mid layers, and I'm sidechaining it to the acoustic bass channel. The difference with track spacer is that it will automatically analyze the frequency of the sidechain for you, and whenever the signal from the sidechain occurs, it will attenuate those frequencies from the sound that you have placed it on. So in this example, bus 31 is the acoustic bass. So whenever the acoustic bass occurs, you'll notice that the frequency area of the acoustic bass will dip. I'm also using track spacer in mid-side mode, which I find sometimes gives more of a transparent result. When the sidechain signal is detected, track spacer is only affecting the mid signal, and therefore the side information is left intact, which works well if you have two sounds, one that's more of a middle or mono sound and the other sound has more stereo information. Okay, that's it for now. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share, and head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. And if you'd like to join the production sessions group, the first session is free, and you'll find all the relevant links in the comments.